Hello and welcome to another session of Global Spotlight Interviews. My name is Hibah Siddiqui. I'm the Global Youth Ambassador with MSU's Global Youth Advancement Network, and I'm here today with our guest, Mr. Chibuzor Agomuoh. Mr. Chibuzor is a guest here from Nigeria, and he started the Sunrise Youth Intervention Organization in 2011, and he's here in the U.S. to promote his book, Rising at Sunrise. So welcome.
Thank you, Hibah.
How is it so far? I know we met earlier this week and we got to show you around MSU's campus. What do you think of MSU so far?
Yeah, MSU is beautiful. Really, really beautiful.
I'm glad, yeah. We're so honored to have you here at MSU, and of course I'm so honored to interview you today.
Thank you.
I had the pleasure of reading your book and it was truly inspiring, so
thank you
I can't wait to talk more about it today.
And also I thank Dr. Luna for making all of this possible.
Of course, yeah. She really is the head of it all.
Absolutely.
All right, perfect. So as I said in the beginning, you started the Sunrise Youth Intervention Organization.
Yes.
So could you please tell us a little bit more about what your organization does, what your motivations were behind it, and what your goal was when creating it?
So in 2011, I started the organization. Usually I call it Sunrise, but the legal name is the Sunrise Youth Intervention Organization. And the idea behind starting this organization was to grant young persons access to opportunities because, you know, like I mentioned in an event a few days ago, that Africa is a continent with inequitable access to opportunities. And I wanted young persons to gain access to these opportunities. So I started it in 2011. It was like a pet project. It wasn't like anything serious. I was still in school at the time. Mm-hmm. And over time, it snowballed and began to grow, and the impact began to expand. And today, I can say it has reached thousands of young persons in Nigeria, in Ethiopia, and the Gambia.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. So what specifically do you do with the young people in your organization?
Yeah, the core areas we focus on is soft skills development and vocational skills development, because the goal is to make sure that young persons gain skills that would enable them become employable. Mm-hmm. Employability is very, very important. Nigeria is a country with a very high level of unemployment, and it's very important that young persons are equipped with these skills to be self-reliant. Mm-hmm. Very, very crucial. So yes. We train young persons to make clothes. We send them to fashion schools. Some of them, we've sent them to baking schools to learn these skills, to be able to start businesses for themselves. And then again, soft skills is the key. Mm-hmm. Very, very important. Leadership skills. So we major on effective communication. We also major on the art of collaboration, basic skills that are essential to enable them make proper life choices for productive living. So that's basically it.
Yeah, wow, yeah. That's amazing. I'm sure, you've got a lot of fulfillment from seeing kids, come in and get jobs. That's
absolutely.
So
and we have lots and lots of stories of, success stories of young persons who, through our program, have been able to find their path and create something very meaningful for themselves. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Of course, that's amazing, truly amazing. So my next question for you is, in your book, you talk about your role as a youth mentor and a leader. Mm-hmm. So what do you think is the most important thing to keep in mind when working with young people? Yeah.
Sometimes I say this tongue-in-cheek statement that many times when adults work with teenagers, they forget that they were once teenagers. Mm-hmm. To work with young persons, we have to realize the enormous potential that they have and respect that. So in Africa, where I come from, being an elder, you are accorded high respect, and sometimes young persons are relegated to the background. Mm-hmm. Unlike America, where youth is worshipped, So I usually say this, that to work with young people, if you're a youth mentor, a youth counselor, you have to have that at the back of your mind, that you're working with people who have enormous potential for great propensity for great things in the future. And you need to approach them with respect. And also, very importantly, you also have to bear in mind that these young persons are delicate in that, you could make or mar them with your approach. So dedication towards enabling them make out something meaningful for their lives is very, very important. So respect is is one of the things I say, because when you respect young people, they would accord you similar respect, and they would be willing to listen to your guidance, your mentorship, as opposed to belittling them and thinking that, okay, maybe you're a young person, what do you know?
Exactly,
So, yeah.
That's true. It's so important. I feel like as a young person, that's something that I look for in a mentor. Like, you definitely want that respect that goes both ways. That's what builds those strong connections. So very important. I'm glad that that's something that you preach and share for us, which is really important. I had, like I said, the privilege of reading your book, and every single chapter was filled with important lessons and so many stories. You said that you met and interviewed 55 influential, inspiring young people.
That's right.
And getting to hear their stories and then seeing, where they are now and everything they've accomplished is just so inspiring. So is there a particular story in there that you found stood out to you, or is there one specific story that you'd like to share with us today?
Well, that's a difficult question, I would say. All the stories in the book, I would say, speak to me. Getting these individuals for this book project was a carefully thought out process. Every story is very unique, and right from chapter 1 to chapter 10, very unique, very important, especially stories that speak of identity, stories that speak of surmounting the challenge of poverty. Those are very, very key stories that resonate with a lot of people around the world. And the reason why I chose to focus on people of African descent, especially young persons in Africa, is that Africa seems to be the continent with young persons who are the most disadvantaged. Though I would say Africa is the richest continent on the surface of the earth when it comes to natural resources, but like I said at the beginning, the inequitable distribution of resources has made a lot of people wallow in neglect and poverty. So hearing stories of people who have risen out of the ashes of this limitation speaks to a lot of us and reminds us of the importance of stories like this, because many times we don't hear them.
Yeah.
We expect to hear stories from superstars, or maybe the Bill Gates or the people that are so wealthy. But there are people in different corners of the world who have gone through the fire and through the storm, and have been able to make out something very meaningful for their, for themselves and for their communities. So I felt it's very, very important to echo the stories of these people. And that's what is really, really precious about this book to me.
Yeah, amazing. I love that. It's, like I said, just reading those stories and the little descriptions of where they are now, like everything they've accomplished. A lot of these individuals came from, like you said, nothing, and have, won scholarships, have gone back to school to study master's, doctorates. So it really is inspiring how accomplished they are now. I love that. Kind of related to what you were just talking about, every chapter starts with a quote, and most of them are African proverbs. And I found them all very inspiring, all very, heart-wrenching. Like, I could relate to them. And I just want to ask you, I know that every individual in your book is an African individual. So when you were writing this book, who was your target audience? Because although it is focused on African individuals and the struggles that they face, it is kind of applicable to the global audience. So was that something you kept in mind when writing the book? Yes,
I wanted to create a material that would be globally appealing, but also would speak loudly to the African audience. So now, why is it called Rising at Sunrise? Some people have asked me that question. Why is it called Rising at Sunrise? And I chose the color of sunrise, you can see, and then that's something I'm wearing too. Rising, it's called Rising at Sunrise. Not the sunrise there is not because the organization is Sunrise. It's symbolic. Sunrise is the beginning of the day, the onset of the day. And like I usually jokingly would say that when it's sunrise, some persons don't rise from their beds. They're still in bed. So rising at sunrise is like taking up responsibility at the onset of your life. Your youthfulness, your youth is the onset of your life. And rising at that moment is very, very key. Because there are people who stay in bed. I'm saying that metaphorically. They stay in bed till sunset. And then at sunset, they begin to ask themselves, what have I actually done with the day? What have I actually done with my life? So it's a message to young persons to say, this is the onset of your life. This is your sunrise. You are being blessed with the abundance of opportunities as sunlight. You take advantage of it and make something meaningful out of your life. So that's the message behind that. It also features essential skills, and the blend of the theories and the stories is intentional, because storytelling is very powerful. I would say that storytelling gives us a front view perspective to the human experience. When you hear people's stories, you know what it is to be a human being.
Exactly.
So I felt that blending those essential skills with the stories would really drive home the message of the book to the young persons. And so you find the chapters being tailored in this fashion: the passport of positive self-concept, the currency of effective communication, the boots of resilience, the umbrella of adaptability, and all that. It gives the idea of someone dressing up and preparing for a mission. And so that's what this book is about: speaking to young Africans and getting them to be prepared for a mission. Because I read something a while ago, and it says that Africa is the youngest continent, meaning that we have about 70% of people between the age of 15 to 40.
Okay.
And in the next 30 years, 1 in every 4 person you meet will be African. And so it's the youngest continent because we have more young persons on the continent. And it's important that attention should be given to young Africans, because in a way I would say they're the future of the world, the future of the world's workforce. They're the future of a lot of things, So in the introduction, I mentioned something very, very key. Towards the end, I said the sun is rising and a new day is dawning. Will you stay asleep? Because the rest of the world is watching Africa. For a long time, there's been this blanket and I wouldn't call it an umbrella. I would call it like a covering cast of the past: slavery and colonialism. And sometimes Africa seems to be using all of that as a crutch for excuse, like, oh, because we went through this. But that's not an excuse anymore, because we've seen countries that have been through slavery too and colonialism, not Africa, and they have risen significantly. So it's a call to action to young Africans to say, hey, get up, do something meaningful with your life, regardless of the limited opportunities on the continent. There is still a whole lot you can do, to make progress with your life. And also to become globally relevant.
Exactly. Yeah, that's amazing. I love that answer. And similar to that, my next question is like how you talk about everyone has to like get up at sunrise. It's time to do something. It's time to make something of your life. What advice would you give to young people who are in those disadvantaged situations where they feel like they don't have any opportunities, or like they can't build up from where they are? What would you tell them?
I would say use what you have. So there's a story in the book in chapter 6. Chapter 6 is the crown of higher order thinking. And there's a story of a young man who is a funny story though. He talked about how he lived his life without a sense of purpose and succumbed to peer pressure. So whatever his friends wanted to do, that was what he wanted to do. Never really had a mind of his own, Then came a time when he attended a wedding. And at this wedding, there was this man he saw. The man had, he has his business overseas, so he decided to visit. At the time, he was at the wedding. And as young people, he was thinking, oh, this man has a lot of bucks because, back home, if you walk overseas, we feel you have a lot of money, and, to freely give out. So they were thinking, he has a lot of bucks to give. And then the man sat them down. There were about 3 of them. And then he asked them, I have a question to ask you. That was how he started. And then he asked them, what is your goal for your life for the next 10 years? And he said it was a very shocking question because it never really occurred to him that he should have strategic plans for his life for the next 10 years because he's been busy following his friends. And the man said, I'm going to give you something that is beyond money. And so he spoke to them about think, evaluate, and analyze. And the following few minutes he spent with them, he said was a eureka moment for him. It made him realize that what I have been looking for is all within me. And many young persons think the things they're looking for is here, is there. If you do not harness the inner resources, the inward resources, you will find it difficult to harness the resources outwards.
Exactly.
So first of all, I tell young persons, use what you have within you. By the time you maximize what you have and you exploit, you grow it, everything around you will become meaningful. Even if it's a grain of sand or a dry leaf, it will become meaningful because you have decided to harness what you have on the inside. So I usually say this to young persons because, we've been doing this for 11 years, and I can tell you for a fact that we found young persons in very disadvantaged situations when we met them, let's say 7 years ago, 8 years ago. But now the story is entirely different because they learned to maximize what they have on the inside. So as part of our training, one of the things we try to get young persons to do is for them to analyze and discover or make a list of the things they love about themselves. And that's why I started the book with the first chapter, Positive Self-Concept. And it started with this quote by Lucille Ball, which says, love yourself first and everything will fall in place. And then it says you can't do anything meaningful in this world without loving yourself. So we try to let them know that there is a whole lot you have on the inside of you. It is your job to harness them, develop them, and then everything around you will open up to you. So that's my message to young persons in disadvantaged situations.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, when I read the book, the first chapter, when I saw that quote about loving yourself, that was a perfect way to start the book because it really, you can't do that first thing without, the first step is so important before you can put on the rest of the things, like the boots of resilience, all the other skills that you mentioned in the book. Very, very important. We talked a lot about everything you've done now, everything you've accomplished, the book, how it all came to rise. So I want to just take a few steps back. Can you talk a bit about your career path, like what you did in university and what different experiences and opportunities you had that led you to where you are today?
Yeah, when you ask me what I read in the university, I smile because actually what I read in the university is miles apart from what I'm doing now. And a lot of people can relate to that too. I read human physiology. That was a medical course. And I had wanted to go further to do physiotherapy and then read it up to a PhD level. Like I mentioned, I had started this when I was still in school doing my bachelor's degree. For me, it was a pet project, but then I discovered over time that my life's purpose was around this as the project began to grow and everything began to expand. So I looked at it and I said, yes, I would love to do physiotherapy, but to me, this is very important and more fulfilling. I think what I can do is educate myself and develop myself in this area. So what I decided to do, because I don't have a bachelor's degree in youth development, so I decided to attend trainings. I attended a number of trainings in leadership and soft skills development because you cannot give what you don't have, of course. So I started to attend those trainings, and I'm really, really grateful to the organizations back in Nigeria that created free opportunities for such trainings, and also trainings that came at subsidized fees. That really helped me immensely. And eventually I had an opportunity for an exchange program some years ago by the US government. I came to the US and I studied civic engagements at Appalachian State University in North Carolina, for a number of weeks, I think 6 weeks. And that was a game changer for me because it opened my eyes to structure and how to build systems in an organization. Because if I must expand my impact, I have to have a solid organization. And so that was a tipping point for my career, I would say. And then shortly afterwards, I attended another training in South Africa, Youth Essential Skills by IREX. It was a wonderful opportunity as well. And I was able to apply for grants and was able to implement projects in Ethiopia. Was also able to implement another project in the Gambia. So all of those, even while implementing those projects, they were learning experiences for me. And they helped me tremendously. I still subject myself to learning every single day, every single moment. So currently, I am a community engagement exchange specialist with IREX on a program of the U.S. Department of State. So I was in Detroit last week to help mentor fellows, which I would continue to do over the next coming months virtually. And it's a great learning experience because, of course, if you are to create impact, you have to feed yourself with information and knowledge. So all of those have really helped me to create the things that I'm creating today for young people, and also creating platforms and opportunities for them to grow and develop.
Yeah, amazing. I love that. It's always so inspiring to hear where people start off and where they are now, because everyone's path is so different. And when you're in university, you think you want to do one thing, and it can change so much. So, just keeping that open mind is so important, especially for me as a young person to hear, where people started off and how many times their path has changed. It's kind of reassuring in a way. Like, you don't need to know exactly what you're going to do all the time. There's always going to be change. Yeah. My next question is, we talked about your past, we talked about your present. So, you told us about the story. What is your 10-year plan? What are your goals for the future?
Yes, that's a good question. Yes, so years ago, I had designed a 10-year plan. I would say over time, I tried to tweak it a little bit. So my 10-year plan is to create a center that would increase access to soft skills and vocational skills development to thousands of young persons in my city, Calabar. And that's very important to me because I've seen this idea replicated in different places. I've seen this, the US takes youth development very seriously. And it's always very impressive when you go into certain organizations, certain establishments, and you see young persons leading those establishments, boldly. And why is that? Because these opportunities were provided to young persons early on in life. So I want to do the same thing for young people back home, back in Africa. Do we have youth development centers in Nigeria? Of course we do. But I have the kind of center I want at the back of my mind, something unique, something different from what we are used to. So that has been ringing in my mind every single day. I wake up every day to it, and I keep asking myself, how can I make this dream a reality? And one of the ways I encourage myself is that I think all the things I'm doing, all the projects I'm designing, all the things I'm creating, step by step, they are leading me into fulfilling that. So writing this book is a way of extending that center, to young persons everywhere. And eventually I would be able to make something visible out of this, a visible, tangible experience of this. So I would call this book like like the plan,
Yeah.
and then think of creating something that would exude the values of this book.
Amazing. Yeah, that sounds like such a great idea, and I wish you the best of luck. I hope one
Thank
day
you.
your dream comes to life.
Yeah.
I'd love to see it, used in your area. I'm glad that you're, giving back to the community that you grew up in, and I hope that expands to, all over Africa, maybe all over the world one day. That'd be great. But thank you so much for coming today. I had
Thank you
such a
much.
pleasure interviewing you today and learning
Thank you.
so much about your book. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Hibah.
Of course.